Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. We're back in Vegas this week for UFC Vegas 93 at the Apex for a flyweight main event. We've got Alex Perez taking on rising contender, man, Tatsuro Taira. Super excited for hopefully for this to be his breakout moment, get himself into the top 10 of the division. Really nice prospect. And then earlier today, we lost Ikram Aliskerov versus Carli. So co-main event up in the air. Not too sure what that's going to be. Left with 12 total fights. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, help the boys out a little bit. Let you recap last week. Losing night, unfortunately, on both sides. But I know you got to see some violence live, killer main card. Let you recap that, and we'll jump into these 12 fights.
Yeah, a little bittersweet. You know, it'd be nice if we could watch it live and make a little bit of money, but that did not happen. We had a lot of the same positions this week, at least backing some of the same people. You started off the night with a good underdog win when Punahele Soriano. I thought it was knockout or bust, and maybe that fight could have been called, but I did not expect Puna to just absolutely work him over 15 minutes, you know? Like, that was a really impressive performance from Puna. Thiago Moises versus Ludovic Klein. Moises just couldn't get his grappling going, you know? I feel like he's kind of – what was that?
Just looked flat to me.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit sub or bust, and I don't know. I'm not very hopeful for the future of his career. He's probably a couple of losses away from getting cut. Cody Stamann versus Taylor Lapilus. We were both on Cody Stamann. He probably could be a future PFL Bellator fighter.
Yeah,
but he's been a long stay in the UFC. It was a plus 235, and he looked it. You hit the parlay with the over 2.5 in the Cannonier Armavov fight and the under 2.5 in the Bruno Ferreira Dustin Stoltzfus fight. We talked about this a little beforehand. That was an electric finish with Bruno Ferreira. The spinning back elbow was awesome. You hit that for 1.3 units to win a unit, and then Radke by submission. I don't know. I got to quit doubting Prates. I think that's like the second time at least that I've tried to fade him and it's not worked. And then Stamann by decision. You ended up the night only minus 0.75, so not a terrible night, honestly. Looking over in my card, let's see. Yes, 0-7. I was riding a hot streak going into this fight. I think I got a little bit greedy, a little bit, inflated head is what it is. I was on Radke at plus 195 for 1.5 units, Stamann for 2.2 units. And yeah, we talked about Stamann in an interview talking about wanting to start early in the fight, get it going. And I think after he realized, his best effort in round one wasn't working, he looked deflated in the corner. And it wasn't good from there. Soriano by TKO, the only bet on this one that I'm like, really salty about, I think that probably should have hit, is what it is. I'd place that again at plus 290. Moises by submission, never got the grappling going. Cannonier rounds 4 and 5. Man, going into that, I was like, okay, Cannonier's up 2-1 right here. He's about to start putting the pressure, and this is where Armavov gasses. I don't know. It's one of those ones where, yeah, it was I had it completely wrong the opposite way, but I feel like I'd make that bet again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tried the round 4 and round 5 TKO. Didn't happen. And then Raul Rosas Jr. wins by sub round 1. He gets it in round 2. Is what it is. Probably should have just played Rosas by submission. So minus 5.5 units for me, and the streak comes to a screeching halt. Let's see. First fight of the night, we have Shaylian Neurdanbieke taking on Melquizael Costa. This is in the featherweight division. We got Shaylian, who's 3-2 in the UFC, and Costa, who's 1-2 in the UFC. But he is 1-0 at featherweight. So I do think that this is his rightful weight class. It's one of these ones where they're probably fighting for pink slips, like they're both coming off losses to Steve Garcia as favorites, and they did not perform. They're opening the card here, and I really do think that they're, subject to get cut if they don't put a performance on here. Neurdanbieke, I think that he has a little bit more like top control grappling upside. I also think that he hits a little bit harder than Melky Costa. And I really want to play him, but I do think that he might be a little slower. And that's kind of where I'm hesitant to pull the trigger. I think that Costa is going to be a little bit faster than him, beat him to the punch. And that's a little concerning to me. But if they do both get their shots off, I think Neurdanbieke is going to land the more powerful, the shots that are going to stick out to the judges. And he also has a little bit of a wrestling upside. I just can't get over the speed disadvantage, and it's probably just going to be a layoff spot for me. Although I do kind of lean Neurdanbieke. And at dog money, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if I found myself on him later in the week. But he's certainly the lean for me right now.
Gotcha, man. So starting off with a bit of a disagreement, I kind of waited too late to bet Mel Costa. He was at minus 170, something I was looking at. Now he's above the minus 200s on a lot of books, and I probably am just going to pass on this one as well. But Neurdanbieke is a guy that I'm not necessarily sold on too much. A lot of his wins, really in the UFC, don't hold much weight to me as well. And even, you know, he's got a 50-fight record, but a lot of these are very, very low-level Chinese regional scene fights. He's been finished 9 times as well. His submission defense seems to be a pretty big flaw of his. And, you know, I do think Mel Costa, while it's not the same type of offensive top control wrestling, I think he's a much better submission grappler. And come round 2 and 3, I think the submission's pretty live for him. Shaylian's a super muscled up guy, kind of a big overhand wrestler. And I do think he slows down if he's made to grapple a whole bunch. And I do feel like there's going to be some grappling involved in this fight pretty early, and that's kind of why I think the submission skills of Costa come into play late. But again, minus 200 for a guy who's 1 and 2 in the UFC, coming off not that Steve Garcia is a bad loss, but I mean, he got his ass whooped in that fight. You know, he was wrestling Chris Taglioni like when it was over for the next couple of seconds because he was hurt so bad. But I do think he's a better fighter than Shaylian. I feel like Shaylian, if he doesn't get his offensive wrestling going, he doesn't have many more paths to victories in this fight. And so that's kind of why I like Mel Costa. I feel like he can hang in the grappling, threaten with the submissions. I feel like he is the better striker and does have the better cardio. You see the body work that he had in the Austin Lingo fight, and then you see Shaylian get hurt with the body kicks and then a left hand to the body in Steve Garcia fights. So maybe the body work something Costa looks to go to, but he's ultimately the side that I came out on, but not trying to force a play, trying to be smart, you know, not having the best year right now. So trying to be smart with my plays and laying minus 200, something I don't think the smartest move in this fight. So maybe violence. I know his first fight of the night, so that's something that we could look at as well. I expect it to be pretty high pace. Moving down to the women's strawweight fight, we have Julia Polastri taking on Josefine Knutsson. You and I both don't really have too many opinions. Didn't do too much tape on this one. This is a fight where Knutsson, you usually see her as a minus 200, 300, 400 favorite in fights, and here she is with a lot of money coming in on the other side, and you're getting her at like minus 170. So it's a little bit tempting for me. You know, teammate of Khamzat Chimaev, long kickboxing background, but I actually think her grappling is super impressive as well. She's not one of these girls that I have a worry about blowing her wad. She goes out there and smart with the game plan. When she gets on top, she doesn't rush much. She's there for the W. I like to back that. On the side of Polastri, you know, she lost to Jasmine Jastovicius via offensive wrestling on the Contender Series, and the UFC did bring her back. Much bigger favorite in her second time around. UFC trying to get her into the UFC here, and I think she's a pretty good, solid prospect. Decent ground game, decent submission skills, and on the feet, she's a mean, gritty Brazilian who will get in your face and throw. And while I think Knutsson has a clear advantage in striking, Julia's forward pressure and just tenaciousness could be enough to make it a little bit close. But if that happens, I think we see Knutsson mix it up and take her down and find the offensive wrestling. So I'm on the Josefine Knutsson side by decision.
Yeah, I was surprised to see Knutsson, the amount of control time she's able to rack up. In her first UFC fight, she only needed 1 takedown to get over 6.5 minutes of control time. And in her second UFC fight, she's getting over 10. And you don't see that a lot in women's division. So it is nice to know that she has that to fall back on when you know that she's coming from a kickboxing background. It's rare that you see somebody with a rounded game, especially unranked strawweights. So yeah, it's simply because I don't know much about Polastri other than she's tough. I'll lean Knutsson as well, but not a strong take, and certainly a fight I'm okay with laying back on. Right. Moving up to the featherweight division, we got Jeka Saragih taking on Westin Wilson. I mean, this is kind of the most lamb to slaughter fight that the UFC could put on, you know? Jeka Saragih, I just watched his highlight clips, and, you know, he only has a few UFC wins, but he's got an amazing highlight clip, man. I mean, he's absolutely terrifying. It seems like he has stones in his hands. And Westin Wilson, huge for the division. In a fight where Jeka Saragih, or in a weight class where Jeka Saragih is probably undersized, they matched him up with one of the biggest guys in the division, in Westin Wilson, and that could add some something to the fight, but I really doubt it. I actually played Westin Wilson against Gene Silva at like plus 700. You know, it was some insane. I was like, you know, maybe a banana peel or something, but he folded. You know, I think the moment that he feels pressure coming towards him, he looks for a way out. He looks to throw up submissions, and I don't think that he's going to find that here. Jeka Saragih, I don't know, man. He doesn't give you much breathing room, and he hits so hard that I could see Westin Wilson folding with the first hard shot that he takes. That's probably how I see this fight going, and that should be how it goes with Jeka being a minus 350.
Yep, I tend to agree. I feel like Jeka's powerful enough, Muay Thai is good enough, and the defense of Wilson's bad enough that Jeka's going to get himself on the inside and should find the chin at some point. But, you know, I can't say that Jeka's, you know, like it does feel like a lamb to slaughter, but minus 350 on a guy like Jeka, who has proven to have, you know, limited cardio, who's been finished multiple times, who has shown that he doesn't have much of a ground game. I can't really be a proponent for laying that type of price tag on Jeka whatsoever here. Westin Wilson, you know, kind of wonder boy, pretty sure that's who he trains with. You can kind of see his styles, a little bit of bouncing around, karate style, hands low, but dude's not very good at it. Tends to let guys get on the inside and put his lights out. I do think, you know, looking at the Jubilee fight, I know it was up at 55, but Jubilee was a lot bigger than Jeka, and when he got down to the mat, that was enough just to hold Jeka there. And Wilson, you know, Westin Wilson has a bunch of submission wins. If he were to try to go to the grappling here, it could make this fight a little bit close. Westin Wilson submission, maybe a long fly stab this week, but yeah, man, I feel like Jeka's mean enough, tough enough that he's going to find his way on the inside and likely find the TKO early in this fight.
Before you move on, we use Tapology to go through this. If you'll update it, we now have a new co-main event, Miles Johns taking on Douglas Silva de Andrade.
Nice. I wish it was Ulanbekov and Van, but
yeah, I think that was the fight to showcase, especially them both kind of being prospects. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't do that, but so be it. It's honestly a banger fight, Johns and de Andrade.
Yeah, I'm glad what's his name, Lucas Almeida and Timmy Cuamba weren't getting it coming off losses. Yeah. So back down to women's division, women's flyweight, we got Carli Judice taking on Gabriella Fernandez. You know, I don't have too many thoughts on here. Carli Judice seems to be like a pretty popular underdog this week. The lines moved significantly in her favor. And, you know, in her Dana White Contender Series fight, the volume's definitely there. You know, she put up large volume with another good kickboxer in Karascate standing across from her. Her boxing looks good. She throws in combination. But truth be told, man, I think she's a little too inexperienced to be in the UFC. She was signed off of a loss. I think she might even be a little too small for this weight class. And on the side of Gabriella Fernandez, it's, you know, I know she's not won in the UFC yet, but you know, Carli's, from what I can tell from watching the few fights of Carli, she's not a grappler. She's not a good offensive wrestler, typically doesn't go to that game plan. And that's the easiest path to victory, obviously, to beat Gabriella Fernandez, is to take this girl down and neutralize her. And if she's not going to do that, I kind of lean with Gabriella Fernandez to kind of just be the more athletic girl here, the girl with the better footwork, the more powerful shots. So easy pass for me. But I don't really agree with all the public money coming in on Carli Judice. I'm on Gabriella Fernandez this week.
Yeah, I think I'd take Gabriella Fernandez as well. Her being a favorite, and we haven't seen her get a win in the UFC, it's going to be a hard pass for me as well. And I think Judice just is getting a lot of credit for being tough and having good cardio. I don't think that that's going to take you too far. So I'll take the much more athletic girl, like you mentioned, and Gabriella Fernandez, but complete pass for me. Oh my gosh. All right. So, kind of a sleeper fight, man. Nate Manness taking on Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick, notorious for being a supper bust type of fighter. He doesn't seem to have too many skills outside of his ground game. And he's a huge underdog here to Nate Manness, who we've seen get some quality wins in the UFC, kind of mixes in his wrestling with his striking. But truthfully, he's never really blown me out of the water. It seems like he's had a couple of tough matchups, and it's hard to look good in those fights. But even in the fights that he's like absolutely killing people, the fundamentals of his style, his foundation isn't blowing my mind by any means. I think that he's a little careless with his entries whenever he does try and do takedowns. And I think that there are some opportunities for Flick to capitalize on that. And for that reason alone, I'm laying off of this fight. Nate Manness isn't somebody who I've seen and thought he should be a -600 in the UFC, even to Jimmy Flick. So that's why I'm laying off, but I do think that Manness probably can come in here, push a pace, and make Jimmy Flick fold. Second round.
Yeah, I kind of like the Westin Wilson sub. I feel like that's Weston's only path to victory. It's kind of the same here with Jimmy Flick. That I feel like that's the only way he's going to get the fight done, and you're going to get that probably north of 500, 600, 700 on some books. And so any stab there, I don't necessarily hate it, but I also kind of think that guys like Mateus Mendonça, Johnny Munoz Jr., Umar Nurmagomedov, they're better submission grapplers than Jimmy Flick is, and they weren't able to get the submission on him. So Jimmy's kind of one of these guys who I feel like is a little bit opportunistic with his submissions, not someone who kind of puts you through the ringer on the mat before he finds his sub. And Malcolm Gordon, I went back and watched that fight this week because I didn't really remember it too much. Malcolm Gordon was all over Jimmy Flick until he just pulled a Malcolm Gordon. Jimmy Flick to me at 34 seems like he's really, really slowing down. 6 TKO losses at that weight class is nothing that you like to see either. And if Flick doesn't get the round 1 sub, I feel like Nate's going to really start to put his combinations together and hurt him. I think round 2 is probably where this TKO from Nate Manness comes. Just a bigger, faster, much more durable, better athlete at this point. I really like his boxing, man. But you said he's not deserving of this price tag. One of my favorite features with Bet MMA, the VIP, is to go back and look at the history of where these guys have been in the UFC as underdogs and favorites. And Nate Manness was a very slight favorite, like -120 in his debut to Johnny Munoz Jr. Wins that, so it's not even off of a loss. And then he's a dog to Luke Sanders, a dog to Tony Gravely, a dog to Mateus Mendonça. Now he's -600 in the UFC fight. It's definitely not deserving. So would never catch me laying that type of price tag. Maybe I chase a prop like a round 2 TKO or something. But even then, man, trying to get too cute with it, probably just going to pass altogether from that fight. Moving on to our prelim main event. Maybe that's why I don't know why they didn't move this to co-main event. I don't know. It's a fight night. Prelim headliner doesn't do too much for the eyes, but Tagir Ulanbekov versus Joshua Van is probably one of my favorite fights on this card here, man. And I really, truth be told, I think Ulanbekov's turned a corner the last couple fights. I think the guys looked really, really good on the feet. I think his grappling's looked really good. I think his cardio's looked really good. And watching the fight back with Tim Elliott, watching the fight back with Zalgas, I really do think this guy should be 17-0. I think he's gotten robbed in both of his losses. And I just feel like he's going to bring the style to Joshua Van that Joshua Van's really going to struggle with. He's one of these guys who he's going to drop round 1. That's pretty much guaranteed. So, I can pretty much bank Tagir winning round 1. Josh Van's one of these guys who likes to come on in round 2 with his boxing and work the body. And while it's really good, man, and he's a really good prospect, I think he's just in over his head in this matchup here, man. I feel like the grappling is going to be way too much for him. And at some point, and probably, I'm not counting it out early, but I do think Tagir's wrestling is going to eventually grind him out. Tagir's eventually going to find the submission. So I like Joshua Van at only 22 years old, man. This is his 4th fight within the calendar year. He's clearly here to fight, get better. It's clear that he's improving. But a Bunez, what's the other guy's name? Dude from like Chile or something. Kevin Borjas. It's just these aren't the highest level wins, man. I feel like Tagir's on that verge of being a top 6, top 7 flyweight, and I really think he's improving right now. So I like Tagir. I like Tagir by sub, and I've lost my Aliskerov parlay leg with him winning. So it looks like right now my only bet 1.9 units on Tagir Ulanbekov money line.
Well, whenever you had seen the parlay, I told you it's really the Tagir Ulanbekov leg that scared me in the first place. I really do think that he has the grappling edge, like you mentioned it. I think he probably does have all the upside when it comes to the submission part of this matchup. But I do think that Joshua Van, if you just take a step back and look at him as a fighter, he's a fighter who pushes a pace at like an unreasonable pace. And that's kind of the fighters that have beaten Tagir in the past. Tim Elliott, the one aspect of his game is that he can push an insane pace and break you down over 3 rounds. And even though that was a really close fight, Joshua Van's 10 years younger than Tim Elliott and probably has a similar fight style. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, it's another guy who pushes a pace. He always makes decisions close. So, it's kind of hard to, blame Tagir for that one. But I do think that Joshua Van brings the stylistic matchup to benefit him here if Tagir cannot get his grappling going. And if it's on the feet, I think that Josh is throwing the harder punches as well. You mentioned him working the body, and I think that that's going to take an effect over Tagir over 3 rounds. And if he is shooting for takedowns and not getting them, that's going to drain that gas tank even quicker. And I think that that's probably where he gets into trouble. Let's see, plus 170, plus 185 hanging out there. It's probably where I'm looking at this fight. Like, I don't know if I'm actually going to play it, like how much I actually believe in what I'm saying right here, but that is how I lean. And as I'm breaking it down, I'm kind of talking myself into plus 185. It's just Tagir. I know he is a good fighter, so it's probably rare that he gets starched, and I don't really like betting against that, but it does make me feel better that you're getting plus money on Van. So Van's going to be how I lean, but not sure if I'm actually going to get there. Moving on to the main card opening fight, finally a favorable matchup, I guess you could say, for Adam Fugitt. He's 1-2 in the UFC, but I don't think the UFC's wanted him to win until this fight. Yeah. Like, you don't match him up against your undefeated prospect Michael Morales and want him to win. And in the fight that he did win, he's coming in as like a plus 300 to Yusaka Kinoshita. Yeah. And then Mike Mallet, another guy that they've been trying to push. He just doesn't fight enough, but he's been kind of counted out by the UFC for what it's worth up until this point. Whereas Josh Quinlan, I feel like, is kind of turning into a failed prospect. I think that he was pretty hyped coming in off the Contender Series, and then getting that first round finish over Jason Witt, you're like, okay, this guy might actually have a future in the UFC. He's still only 30 years old at the time, and then he drops the loss to Trey Waters. Then Danny Barlow knocks him out, and I think it's kind of like the put up or shut up fight for him here against Adam Fugitt. Like I said, the UFC's not been impressed with Fugitt up until this point. And I think if you drop a loss to him, you're probably out, man. He's now 31 years old. I'm not really sure how this fight plays out. I think it's lined as a pick 'em, and probably rightfully so. I'm curious to see Fugitt against a level of competition that is comparable. We've seen him go out there as a dog and get an upset win, but I just feel like the mentality of coming into this fight being that it's an equal and he's not being counted out, it's kind of it's forcing him to step up into a new position that we haven't seen in the UFC. And I'm curious to see how he attacks it. I'm going to lean Adam Fugitt because I do think that Josh Quinlan wasn't really that good whenever he came into the UFC, and we're kind of seeing where his ceiling is at this point. Yeah.
A lot of the same thoughts, man, on Adam Fugitt this week as well. And kind of pissed that I missed out on plus money. Like Josh Quinlan was taking some action and he was getting up to like minus 130. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to get Fugitt plus 105, plus 110, maybe plus 120 by fight time, and got back on DraftKings this morning and he was like a minus 105. It seems like money's starting to kind of, once it hits the minus 130s, it kind of seems like there's some buyback on Adam Fugitt. And I think this is a super close fight. And
if you want it, you can get it. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah,
the plus
there.
money. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And then it's probably something that I do find myself on this week, truth be told, because Quinlan he's not a guy that I think too much of. I think he's pretty one-dimensional. I feel like he's KO or bust. He doesn't mix in any offensive wrestling. The volume is super low. The wins that he has, it's Jason Witt, who is up there with some of the chinniest fighters who have ever graced the UFC, and all of them previous are very low-level wins. You've seen the guy pop before for steroids. And then, the fights with Trey Waters, Danny Barlow didn't look good, man. And the Barlow knockout, he's wobbled across the octagon for 2 minutes straight, knocked down a couple times. And that was just not even 4 months ago, but a fight time, just a little over 3 months ago. So I don't think that's working for him in his favor either. Where Fugitt, both of these guys, fourth fight of the UFC. So I feel like both of them are fighting for a contract. I feel like the loser's probably not going to get re-signed here. And I've heard that Adam Fugitt's dropped everything, moved his girl and everybody in the family out to fight ready. So he's all in for this last fight, which is something
I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I like his grappling. I think if anybody's going to have grappling success, I think it's Adam Fugitt. I think Adam Fugitt is a little bit more he's not good or great anywhere, but he's good everywhere. He's just a well put together MMA fighter. My one concern, he's 35 years old. He is not anywhere near as athletic, anywhere near as fast as a Trey Waters or a Danny Barlow. And so I feel like Quinlan might have a little bit more success finding his strikes, but I don't know. I kind of think Adam Fugitt's 55% here. I think he should be the minus 120 favorite. So plus money. If it hangs out long enough, I might talk myself into it.
I get a little bit Charles Radke vibes from Adam Fugitt. It might just be that he's kind of like a country-looking white dude, but when you talked about him being well-rounded but not great at anything, and he's been finished a couple of times, and you think about the speed difference between him and Quinlan's last few opponents, we could see that. Man, it's weird. The more you talked about it, the more I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there are opportunities for Quinlan, and him being 35. I don't know. I'm happy that his family moved out with him down there and he's taking it serious. I think that's probably what he needed to be able to take it to the next level. So cool.
Yeah. Interesting fight, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Asu Almabaev taking on Jose Johnson. Asu Almabaev's a guy that I've cashed a couple tickets on against Vergara. I think I hit a 2-3 sub prop on him with O'Day in Nashville. I think Asu Almabaev's pretty good. Just truth be told, man. I know some people don't think he's that good. I truth be told, I think he's a pretty decent prospect, man. I think his wrestling is top notch. It's not just a single leg, a double leg. He can chain these takedowns attempts together until he gets it. And that he will get takedowns in this fight. I can pretty much guarantee that. But that is kind of the extent to his game. If Jose Johnson does enough to be able to keep this fight standing, it does worry me a little bit. Jose Johnson's pretty active off of his back, and I'd take it firsthand grappling with someone your size. Fucking limbs suck when you're grappling people, man. Long legs. It's hard. The butterfly guard is there. I don't know, man. I feel like Asu is going to get takedowns. I'm just not so sold on if he's going to find the sub, if he's going to be able to pass guard and hold this guy down. But I'm also not sold that Johnson's going to have the healthiest of weight cut to make 25, because he's going to be probably the biggest 125er the UFC's ever had if he successfully makes weight here. And to have the height, the skills, probably a striking edge that he does at like plus 400, man, I think I don't want to fade Asu Almabaev just because, you know, I've kind of rode the train with him and found a way to make some money off of his last two fights. But if Jose Johnson comes in here and makes this weight healthy, I think it's clear as day that the line could be wide. So I'm going to side with Asu Almabaev, but I think he might have to grind through a couple dangerous moments here through a decision.
Yeah, and to add on to that, it's like Jose just got twisted by somebody who's been in and out of the UFC. Like, that's a tough one to hit on somebody. And if you know that Asu's going to be going to it, the majority of his wins are by submission. It is like an immediate cause for concern. But even more concerning is Asu going to split decision with Zach Makovsky. You know, it's Zach Makovsky. He's now 21-12, and it's looked terrible in that streak that he went to split with Asu. You know, I think he's 3-7 in his last fights coming into that Asu fight. And for him to even make it close, it just seems like one of those regional wins that I expect somebody like Asu to just completely walk through him. And, you know, that was only 2 years ago. So I'm not sure how much he's adding to his game, but I think that those are wins that he should be getting easily. And Jose Johnson is a veteran who I feel like probably should have gotten the call to the UFC a little bit sooner than he did. But it is nice to have him here now, and him making the cut to 125 is concerning. But if it's a good cut, I'll probably end up playing him. I think I did end up playing him against him on Blackshear. But yeah, I'm with you. I think plus 400 and better is a good enough value for somebody with Jose Johnson who has like some legitimate experience on the regional level to make this a close fight, if anything.
I like it.
Moving up to the bantamweight division, Garrett Armfield taking on Brady Hiestand. I was on Garrett Armfield for his fight against Brad Katona. He was coming in there as a 2-1 fate or 2-1 underdog, and I feel like the UFC set him up for that fight to lose. Katona coming off the Ultimate Fighter win.
In
Canada, yeah. I think that the UFC would have preferred Katona to get that win, and it didn't happen. And now we see Garrett Armfield looking more jacked than ever online. It seems like he might have even stepped up his game since realizing that, you know, he can fight at this level. And for Brady Hiestand, I've never been impressed with him. I think I've tried to fade him in all of his fights, dude. I think that he's kind of one-dimensional. He really relies on that takedown, and even though he's coming off of a knockout win, he's somebody who would have to develop a significant amount for me to want to back him. But it is nice that he's only 25 years old, and if he is getting these looks with UFC caliber fighters, I'm here for it. I'm not really sure who he's training with. Do you know, like
Hiestand?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know the camp that he comes from is like the gym where Michael Chiesa trained, but I don't know if anybody else.
That doesn't give me, hope at all. Sick Jitsu is what they have listed, but if he's not getting the looks, he's
Juliana
the type of fighter. Yeah, dude. She's giving him striking classes, man. If he's the type of fighter who needs to go out to insert any big camp, and actually get the repetition with higher level fighters to round out his game. And if he's not, and he's sticking with people that he's comfortable whooping their ass in the training room, I think the game's going to pass him up. So I've got Garrett Armfield here. I'm not like super hyped that we're having to lay minus 200 to play Garrett Armfield after him being a underdog, but I do think that he's the rightful favorite here. And I think that this is probably an easier fight than the Brad Katona fight. So, I think that he's the rightful favorite. He'll be the pick, but a layoff for me. I am curious to see how he performs this time with the new body,
Yeah, I kind of like Garrett Armfield here as well, man. I really hate that he was dog money last time out, gets a close win, and now we got to play almost 2-1 on him. It just kind of seems like maybe there is some potential overcorrection in the line. But he looked career best against Brad Katona, man. His striking was on point. The clearest round of that whole fight was round 1. Garrett Armfield clearly took it. His boxing looked crisp in that fight, man. It looked really, really good. His wrestling looked pretty decent in my eyes. You talked about the picture of him online. He does look like his physique is better than it has been coming into any other UFC fight previously. The one thing that I hate to see was late in that fight, Katona did have grappling success. The times that he has lost and been finished in his career, Garrett Armfield's been submitted twice. And that's the only way that Brady can win this fight is to find the back and find the submission. And I just hate that that's the only way Garrett Armfield's lost throughout his career, because I'm not sold on Hiestand as a prospect either. You talked about it. He's at only 25. There is plenty of room to improve. But I haven't seen it yet whatsoever. It kind of seems like the same Brady each time. Very, very poor striking defense, little to nothing to offer offensively on the feet. And it's not even the best, wrestling. It's kind of like a Joe Selecki. I have to capitalize on positional grappling to get where I want, and then I can have success. But if I don't get to that, he's not going to have success in the fight. And he does a good job of pushing through. He's tough, but I'm not necessarily sold on the gas tank of Brady Hiestand. Danal Badkari absolutely sold it for us in the last minute of that fight last time out. I don't think Garrett makes the same mistakes. Not a fan of the price tag, just because I don't know how much finishing upside there really is. But I do like Garrett Armfield this Saturday too, man. Moving up to 145, we got Lucas Almeida taking on Timmy Cuamba. If it really kind of depends on what Lucas Almeida shows up. If it's the one from the Zellhuber, the Trezano fights, I'd take a stab at plus 160 all day here. But if it's the one that kind of shown up flat against Sabatini and Philly like the last two fights, Timothy Cuamba might have a little bit of success here. But Almeida is a really good striker. He's going to have the height and leaked advantage here. I think he's a really solid striker, and if this fight's on the feet, I think he's going to look super comfortable because I think Timothy's going to be there to be hit. I just don't – I know Timothy is young. He's at Extreme Couture. There's a ton of bodies there. He's going to start improving at a really good rate. The guy's his physique is really good. He's a great athlete. I just don't know what Timmy Cuamba does really good. I don't think he's that good of a striker. I don't think he's that good of a wrestler. So it's I don't see him having the success Pat Sabatini did with the wrestling. I don't really see him even having success on the feet of somebody like Andre Feely or like a Daniel Zellhuber. I don't even think he has that kind of pop on the feet either. This definitely feels dog or pass to me, man. I just hate that the side that I want to play an underdog is coming off of back-to-back finish losses where he's looked career worst. So I hate that. But I'm going to go Lucas Almeida, plus 160. That's an underdog that I think is pretty live to cash on Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I'm reading the stats over here. That doesn't make sense. But yeah, did you say that you went with Cuamba or Almeida?
Almeida.
Yeah, so I'm also on the Almeida side. I actually really like Almeida, and I've been pretty disappointed in his last couple performances.
Right.
But this does seem like a favorable matchup. I actually have seen Cuamba utilize his wrestling and completely work dudes. It just happened to be 2-1 fighters on the regional scene. I'm not sure that he's going to be able to have that type of success against Lucas Almeida. And for what it's worth, it just seemed like he was stronger than those guys that he was able to take down on the regional scene. And again, I don't think that's going to be the case here with Lucas Almeida. Almeida does his best work on the feet. I think that Cuamba is going to give him that option. Cuamba throws some pretty nasty kicks. He works them to the body and he'll switch it up top. And, I'm questioning Lucas Almeida's chin at this point. So I'm curious how he's going to come out off of this TKO loss. I think it was his first one of his career. So that's always kind of a red flag. How is this guy going to react afterwards? That's not something I love to back, but at least it's plus money. And Cuamba hasn't really given me anything to think that he's a rightful favorite here. I just think that the odds makers are seeing Lucas Almeida's downfall in his past few fights, and it's easy to make him an underdog in what I would consider a 50-50 fight. So yeah, Cuamba or Almeida's the pick for me. It's kind of a make or break bounce back fight for him too. So I hope he comes out and isn't hesitant after coming off of his first KO loss.
Yeah.
Moving to the co-main event, bantamweight division, Miles Chapo Johns taking on Douglas Silva de Andrade. Miles Johns, he's one of those fighters, I think we've said it a couple of times, who's pretty good all around. I don't think he's great anywhere. He rarely pulls away in fights, and that's something I don't really like. I also think that the level of competition that he's beating doesn't tell you much, and this would probably be his best win. Douglas Silva throws with enough power that I think that Johns will have to, disguise his entries, because he does get a little bit predictable, and I think that over 15 minutes, Douglas could find the chin on him. I actually don't know what the odds are on that, but where are we? You got him anywhere? Okay, yeah. So plus money, Douglas Silva would be my pick for sure. I think that Miles Johns has to have a perfect 15 minutes, and Andrade just needs one moment to win this fight. So, give me Douglas Silva de Andrade, and I'm totally fine with paying to see Miles Johns get the best win of his life.
I don't think I'm going to, but Miles Johns has been a bet that I've kind of looked at this week. I was looking at it at minus 120. Now it's even minus 130s. So a little money's come in on Miles Johns this week. He's 9 years younger. Andrade is going to be 39 at the end of this month. Statistically speaking, Miles Johns is better defensively. He's better output, much better volume. I feel like if anybody's going to land offensive takedowns here, it's Miles Johns. And you talked about it, just a well-rounded fighter. I think the cardio's improved, and a guy who's 8-0 to the decision. He's proven to know how to win on the scorecards. Douglas de Silva Andrade is a guy who I feel like is a little bit more finish reliant, but at the same time, he holds I feel like if Miles Johns gets a knockdown, it's because of a technical shot that maybe the age and wear and tear of Andrade is the reason why there's a knockdown. Andrade just has clear power that if he lands on anybody, it can affect a fight. And it could be one where Miles Johns is, up 20 strikes on him in the round and then takes one big bomb off the chin and loses the round, And so this is one where, like you talked about, he kind of wins on thin margins. He doesn't pull away with fights. And so the more I've kind of considered it, I'm okay with passing here on the minus 140 because I do feel like it's probably going to go to decision. Douglas de Silva Andrade clearly holds the power upside, sneaky submissions. And, even though he's 39 years old, he's one of these Brazilians that USADA's out of the picture now. He's already been shredded in the past. No telling what kind of supplements and shit that he's on now. So I am happy to pass. But John's round 3 decision is plus money. And that's a direction that I kind of looked this week. I'm going to side with Miles Johns to get the nod on the scorecards. And finally, back down to 125 for our main event. We've got Alex Perez taking on Tatsuro Taira. Just out of principle, man, Alex Perez sitting at plus money, it's kind of tempting to me. He's way more tested. He's fought the better competition. He's coming off 2 fights already this year where the biggest knock on Alex was he's not consistently fighting. He's pulling out of fights. He's fighting once a year. Well, now, he's being active and he's fighting quickly and he looks like he's improving and kind of like the fire's back. But at the same time, as somebody who's struggled on the scale in the past, activity can also be a downfall. He could be wearing his body out to this point with these back-to-back weight cuts. And, anybody knocking out Mateus Nicolau, I think it's liable to happen just with Nicolao's chinniness. We both think Nicolao's a great fighter, but anytime he gets chin checked, we're not shocked, you know? And so I do feel like a lot of flyweights can capitalize on that. And I feel like on the feet, I actually kind of feel like Tatsuro Taira is a little bit better striker, man. I feel like he has a much better kicks. I feel like he's a little bit faster, whereas Perez just kind of swings some overhands to close distance where he would likely try to get his offensive wrestling going. Tatsuro Taira, I know he's going to press the grappling like Almabaev did. I just feel like he's a little bit better at getting to the next position than Almabaev is. You know, we've seen Almabaev go 3 rounds and take a long time to submit somebody like Malcolm Gordon and things, where Tatsuro Taira is a little bit more urgent to getting to his positions, to finding the back, locking in the triangle. My gut tells me, despite thinking Alex Perez money line holds some value where it is, my gut feeling is that Tatsuro Taira is going to find the rear naked choke here. So Tatsuro Taira by submission, continue to climb the ladder, man. A fun Japanese prospect.
Yeah, I mean, this is a a great litmus test for Tatsuro Taira at only 24 years old. This is easily the best fighter that he's ever faced in the octagon, and I think he should be getting. If you matched up Alex Perez with Carlos Hernandez, Edgar Chairez, Jesus Alexander, and CJ Vergara, I would be surprised if he wasn't finishing them inside the distance as well. Alex Perez, he's coming off of 2 of the former champions, and then Almabaev, who will probably be fighting for the belt next. He comes out there, starches Mateusz Nicolau, and I feel like this is almost a must bet for Alex Perez. It's one of those prove it to me type fights for Tatsuro Taira, and he has looked great against the competition that he's fighting, but it's not something that really warrants a minus 200 at this point, in my opinion, just yet. Alex Perez, he's had a pretty up and down career. From weight misses to injury. But as far as the performances that he's putting on, it is what it is when you're losing to Figgy, Pantoja, and Almabaev. Outside of that, though, he's proven himself at a much higher level. And I think as long as he's healthy right now, he's only 32 years old, and he's fought multiple world champions. Tatsuro Taira is fighting Carlos Candelario, man. They're not the same. And until Alex Perez shows like a huge decline, I'm not really certain that I want to fade him at this point. So plus 165 for Perez is kind of what's looking at me. Not sure if I'm going to get there, but that is how I'm liking this fight.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think there's clear value on the dog side here myself.
One other thing, Tatsuro Taira, I'm pretty sure that his back was taken by Edgar Chairez in the 3rd round. He got
I know he was in a guillotine.
Yeah, he got swept or something, and Chairez ended the fight in a really dominant position. I'm not sure exactly where, but he ended the fight in a dominant position, and that was a 3-rounder. So if we see Tatsuro Taira in these championship rounds slow down, that could be where Alex Perez utilizes his experience and could start edging it out.
I like it, man. That's all 12 fights now going down this Saturday at UFC Vegas 93 at the Apex. Flyweight main event, man, but pretty excited for Alex Perez versus Tatsuro Taira. Big sure. Test for him. Excited to see how this one pans out. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us as always. Make sure to like and subscribe, help us out, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.